to introduce yourself, and we can do the same. We'll start with you.
All right, there we go. All right, my name is Jeff Jernigan. I'm the Executive Director of the Mississippi Motor Vehicle Commission.
My name is Angela Turner Ford.
All right. You may
Thank you
proceed.
for being here. Please present to us.
Sure. Yes, I was coming in here about our budget request. The LBO suggested a cut of about $15,000. We're here to request level funding. Over the past year, we have cut our costs and we've complied with the letters from the legislator about trying to save money. We have done that. We had a position that was open. We left it open as long as we could, and then we filled that. So that saved about $20,000 there last year. We currently have about over $1 million in our Treasury fund, which is obviously taxpayers' money. But we're being, obviously we're spending what we can, but I'm being it's terrible today. Protective with the state's money. We're not doing anything too extreme, but we're just asking to keep a level funding. We are expected to increase cost. Our internet and telephone bills will go up at least double, if not quadruple, depending on if we use the ITS suggested one, which would quadruple. But if we use regular through Comcast, it's going to be it's going to go about a double in price over the next year. We also might take we will have also invested in Zoom. Those are other costs that we've had, just some things that we've come up over the past year that we didn't really plan for, but we take that into consideration. Some other costs that we like to plan in our budget, we just don't know, is we might have hearings where they just cost it would come up from those hearings. We plan for them, but we'd hate to have to say, hey, we got to put this off for 2 months until we get to funding for the next year. Sometimes staff sales events at dealerships occur, and we do background checks. We do some other costs. Those are passed through. They pay for them, but we have to have the authority to spend that. And I would hate to get to the situation of having to tell a dealer that we don't, hey, we got to hold up. We're trying to budget, spend this as well we can. We don't want to ever deny or stop businesses doing that. But our revenue, for the most part, has always exceeded what our expenditures are. We are down a little bit in our revenue this year, and I believe that's mainly due to some of these representatives from the manufacturers not being licensed. 2 years ago, I think we were about 750 representatives from those manufacturers. Currently, we're down to about 600. But still, we're way in excess of what our budget is, or what our budget has been appropriated at. We expect about another $50,000 over the next 6 months. So we should easily be in the $425,000, $450,000 range. But for the most part, we're just focusing on keeping a level playing field and everything, and we'd appreciate level funding. So,
Are there any questions? Senator Williams?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The expenses you said that are doubling, quadrupling related to IT expenses, are y'all consulting with the Information Technology Department to ensure best pricing and best practices?
So the ITS wanted us to go with the dedicated C-Spire line or something like that, which would have been $400 a month in the numbers they quoted us, and where we're using Comcast currently, and it's a cheaper rate and everything like that, and we want to use that. But then they're worried about our telephones not being able to be compatible, and then so maybe they are, and we have to buy a special rental telephone that's different than the phones we already have, and so that'll be a recurring monthly charge to rent those phones.
Any other questions? Mr. Jernigan, in light of the additional, proposed issues that could occur during the course of the next year, you mentioned internet, telephone, Zoom, all of those expenses would be covered in the request for level funding?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Well, if there are no further questions, we thank you for presenting to us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Angela Turner Ford. Thank you for joining us this morning. We'll just go around the table and allow us to introduce ourselves, and then we'll let you get started. Senator Chism, you could introduce yourself.
Bart Williams.
I'm sure you know William,
Morning.
so please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Zachary Musselman.
I can't hear you, sorry.
My name is Zachary Musselman. I'm the Executive Director of the Mississippi State Board of Registered Professional Geologists. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. I'm here to request two things above what the Joint Legislative Budget Committee recommended. The first request is for salary and fringe benefits above what was recommended. Just a little back history. This is my first year in the position. I was just hired in June, started June 1st. As I was going through the interview process, the board has suggested to me that the salary would be what I've requested here in the letter. That request was initially made last February, prior to this year's fiscal budget being approved. But I guess it did not make it to the approval state. So I'm making that request again now. So I'm requesting that the salary be $70,892, which was the State Personnel Board's job class realignment recommendation for fiscal year 2020. Our current pay range for the position is between $63,000 and $81,900. The State Personnel Board actually made that recommendation to increase the executive director's salary in fiscal year 2018. Based on U.S. Office of Personnel Management, the average rate for a geologist is over $100,000. So this would put the position well below that average rate. But the board makes this request to increase the salary to try to attract and retain the best candidates in this position to serve the board, geologists, and the state of Mississippi. The second request I'd like to make above the Joint Legislative Budget Committee's recommendation is for the capital outlay. The board is requesting to replace a computer. We currently only have 2 computers that we use for our daily operations. In fiscal year 22, our main computer will be 4 years old, and our second computer that we use will be 8 years old. So we are requesting $2,000 to replace that second computer so that we can keep our daily activities intact and try to prevent any sort of catastrophic failures that might delay serving the geologists as well as the state. I'd just like to finish by pointing out, if I can come back to the salary request, legislative action is the only mechanism for increasing salary for our board. A small agency with high staff retention rates, the only way we can do that is legislatively. So that's why we respectfully make this request. Thank you.
Any questions from members of the committee or analysts? You said you did? Oh, wow. Let me ask a question regarding the request for the computer. The computers that you have, are they functioning currently?
They are, yes.
So with this, what type of, how would acquiring this computer enhance your ability to provide services or?
It's with the second computer being 8 years old, it's just a preventive measure in case something were to happen to try to get ahead of that.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I think that's, unless you have anything more to add, I think we're done. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you.
question about John Digby yesterday. I forwarded you an email. Senator Brand had a question about it, and I sent them an email saying to write a letter to us, like explaining if you had a question about it. So, no further questions. I can bring a copy.
Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, glad to be here.
Good, good. And we are ready whenever you are.
All right.
I guess we'll start by some introductions. I'm not sure, Senator Doty, if you know our other colleagues here. We'll start with, well, you do know Senator Chism, but maybe Senator Williams. Have you met him?
I have not met Senator Williams. Nice to meet you. Yes. In my new office across the street, I do have a speaker that has the House and the Senate, so I am able to listen to all of you, and you're so far, y'all are doing a great job without me.
We miss you. Thank you. And we are ready whenever you are.
All right, well, I neglected to save one of these for myself, so let me have one of these. So I am now the director of the Public Utilities staff, and I will confess that before I went over there, I was not quite as familiar with what the duties of the staff were as I should be. But the staff works closely with the Public Service Commission. All of the filings that come in for rate increases from regulated utilities, for projects from the regulated utilities, requests for new service, it all comes to my office, and I have a team of lawyers and accountants, and we look over it, work back and forth with the companies, and then make a recommendation to the commissioners. So it is a very specialized area. The accountants that work in my office. You know, you don't pick up this knowledge in a regular accounting position. So it's a very specialized position that we have at the public utilities staff. What we're really asking for is just a return to our fiscal year 2020 budget. The way, I'm familiar, of course, with the cuts we took last year across all agencies with COVID and being so unsure about revenues. But we would, if we could go back to 2020, it would allow us to fund 3 positions. It's 3 accounting positions. One is a CPA. We're required by statute to have a CPA. We have filled that position. He started work last week, and we are kind of scrape in order to pay him for the next 6 months. Really, the way we were able to work with this downturn in our budget in 2021 was because we did have several retirements. We had the executive director left, and then we had 2 other department heads who retired after a very long time. And there were some vacant positions. So we have been at work to fill those and get people trained up. So really what I'm looking for is that CPA position and then the restoration of 2 other PINs, which are also accountants. One is a water sewer accountant and one is electric and gas accountant. And that CPA would work across all of those levels. So it's about $250,000. We have a relatively small agency with a relatively small budget. But it's very important to the ratepayers, your constituents across the state of Mississippi. The only other thing I would direct your attention to is perhaps if you look at the different categories, I think the category of travel is a little bit of a misnomer. Really, that should be training in our instance because, of course, with so many retirements, we are going to have to do some additional training, and you have to go to rate school, which is expensive but necessary in order to fully understand how to calculate the rate base and changes in rates. So that is what we are looking for. I would be glad to answer any questions. And then I brought a few special things for the members of this committee. As you know, our office has administered the COVID-19 Broadband Grant Fund. And I thought I'd give you just a little bit of a rundown on it and perhaps a little bit of information on some other broadband activity in the state. But if anyone has any questions on my budget, I'd be glad to take those now.
Any questions? Questions? I have a question, Senator. The accountants that you mentioned, and this question really stems from a bill that came up in the Accountability Committee yesterday.
Yeah.
But do you believe that the accounting services that are performed as it relates to your agency are specific to your agency, or could you operate with a financial officer outside of your?
They are specific to my agency, and in fact, I think that there's been some meetings with the Personnel Board to categorize the accountants in my agency as utility rate specialists rather than just accounting 2, 3, or 4. Because it is such a specialized area. So we've been advertising for accountants the entire time I've been there since July, and because we've hired a couple already. And I was surprised at, and I should not have been, I guess, I had accountants from other agencies, from Medicaid or Department of Health who applied, but their experience was just in no way relevant to what we were looking for. So ours is utility rate accounting.
Thank you. Are there any questions? We'll let you go forward with.
Yeah, I thought this would be a good time. I know y'all are, it's a Friday, and y'all are ready to go, but we have these are for specific senators right here.
Oh, okay.
So you can see it right there. But these go to everybody. These go to everybody. Let me talk about the Broadband Grant Fund just real quickly because I thought you'd like an update. So the bill last year had $75 million that went to 65 to co-ops, another $10 million to other internet service providers. They were allowed to come in and bid on certain unserved or underserved census blocks around the state that the public utility staff designated. And I took over that job on July 16th, and I think it was due the next week. I mean, we jumped right into it. I am happy to report that all of the 75 million has been spent. More than 65 went to co-ops. We had the first round of bidding saw certainly the co-ops bid for 65 million, but we did not have many other service providers who bid. We probably only gave 2 or 3 million to other service providers. So we came back around with a second round of bidding. The legislation allowed us to do that and awarded the rest of that money to the co-ops, that money that was unused. So it was $75 million. The grant awardees are required to match that amount, so it would be a total amount. We've kind of leveraged that into $150 million. And, you know, it was a very quick turnaround because at the time that we did that, the Treasury guidelines all around the CARES Act said, oh, it's got to be spent by December 30th, 2020. There's been some relief in that. It goes to 21 now, but at the time we were operating under that, and that is a very quick turnaround for these co-ops to get fiber up on the poles and to get installations. So I'm very proud of the relationship we've had with them and the work that they have done. But all of the 75 million has been spent. We will continue to monitor throughout the remainder of the grant period to make sure they comply and spend their matching funds. And so you can see right here some information about it on the long legal sheet, but we have 3,100 new miles of fiber in the state of Mississippi as of December 30th, and as of June 30th, it will be over 5,000 new miles of fiber. And we will be looking forward to see how many connections and installations we get. That's lagging behind because, of course, the first step was to get the fiber up, so there are installations ongoing now. Then I also passed around a sheet that is specific to your district, has the counties in your district, I hope. And it has some of the results of the RDOF auction. The FCC just conducted this auction October 29th, and it's been a little difficult to unpack who actually got the money and where it's actually going, but we're starting to be able to do that. A lot of the bids were done as consortiums, so it was hard to know exactly. There was a rural electric consortium, hard to know exactly who that meant and where that money was going. But the public utility staff will now receive applications from each of these to be an eligible telecommunications provider. We're in that process right now. We've already received 25 or 26 applications, I believe, and we'll be reviewing those applications. But this gives you an idea of the money that is coming to your county for rural broadband. This is for unserved areas of your county, the money that has been awarded. It's over a 10-year period. Mississippi was the second highest in the nation. We got about $450 million out of this round of this auction. California was the highest, and then we were next. So Mississippi had a very good showing. This money will be spent, 60% of it is required to be spent in three years. Oh, I may have that backwards. A percentage is required to be spent within 3 years, and then the remainder of it by year 6. But it is a 10-year program. So I think after year 6, there's some checks and balances to make sure that these locations were actually served. So it is a very large boost to rural broadband in our state. So I just thought you might be interested in that.
Thank you. Very interesting. Do you feel that your staff is in a position to accommodate these programs, monitoring and the oversight?
We've had a bit of a decrease in telecommunications work because of deregulations of some of the telecommunications providers. And because of that, our telecom staff has been able to focus on this broadband grant. We've relied on them heavily to do this work. So we're in pretty good shape. We also have kind of reshuffled a couple of our lower level accounting positions. We went through a very long and arduous process with our state personnel board to reclassify them as utilities analysts so they could kind of work in different positions. So we've got some support staff for them if we need it as well. But yeah, I think we're pretty good in our telecom area as long as the remaining part of our staff is at full capacity.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, this is great information. Thank you so much.
I know that as a senator, I would have loved to have that information too, so I wanted to provide it to you.
I may post this online.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to see y'all.
Have a good weekend.
Y'all stay healthy. Okay.
Have a good weekend.
And I'll get a better idea of what double hurts. And I'll let you know.
What they're saying, just hold on until you talk to me.
Yeah. You doing good? You look good.
Good morning. Let me lay that there so I'll leave it.
We ready? Good morning. My name is Angela Turner Ford. We'll just go around the room and we'll introduce ourselves and then we'll allow you to start.
Bart Williams.
I'm Andy Kilpatrick. I'm outside board counsel to the Architecture Board.
And I'm John Cawthorn, the board's executive director, State Board of Architecture.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, and we'll just allow you to present to us.
All right, thank you. So I've given you a handout. You'll notice on page 2 is a list of all of our current board and committee members. On page 3 is a description of our agency. The Board of Architecture was established in 1928 in order to safeguard the life, health, and property of the public. The board is a consolidation of 3 regulatory bodies: the Board of Architecture, the Landscape Architecture Advisory Committee, and the Interior Design Advisory Committee, each of which have 5 members appointed by the governor for a total of 15 members. Collectively, we refer to the agency as the State Board of Architecture, and this consolidated structure allows us to operate at optimal efficiency versus having 3 separate programs. The board employs 2 full-time employees who are assisted by contracted attorneys and a contracted private investigator. The board meets at least quarterly, and the advisory committees usually meet 2 to 4 times per year. The mission of the board is to serve the state of Mississippi by protecting and preserving the life, health, and property of the Mississippians who live, work, and play in the built environment through the regulation of the professions of architecture, landscape architecture, and certified interior design. I will note that regulation of certified interior design is very different from the regulation of architecture and landscape architecture, in that we only regulate use of the title Mississippi Certified Interior Designer. We do not regulate the practice of interior design, so anyone is allowed to practice interior design within the state of Mississippi. They simply cannot use the title Mississippi Certified Interior Designer. And that title simply conveys that they've met certain rigorous qualifications, minimum education, exam experience requirements, and that they adhere to a professional code of conduct. So it's a little different from the other two professions that we regulate.
Let me ask a question, if you don't
Sure.
mind. Are they prohibited, if they do not have this Mississippi certification, from providing services in the state?
No, they are not. No. Anyone can practice interior design. It's just the title that's restricted.
Thank you.
Sure. On the top of page 4, you will note that the board's guiding purpose is protection of life, health, and property. We all use buildings and outdoor spaces every day. People spend the majority of their life indoors, and the public really has little control or knowledge of the design of those spaces, and they deserve reasonable assurance that the spaces are designed and constructed with safety in mind by qualified professionals. So state-level regulation helps to ensure that those spaces are properly designed, as great harm could come to the public as a result of poor or negligent practice. The board has focused very specifically on efficiency. Over 90% of our licensure services are now submitted online. We're very close to getting to 100%. We've got our last 2 paper applications that we're hoping to get online very soon. So hopefully when we report next year, it'll be 100% or very close to that. And our applications are processed within 3 weeks. We're actually well below that. Our average for this past fiscal year was 2 weeks. And that, of course, also having our paper files online, no longer having, for the most part, paper files. Most of them have been scanned. That's been helpful for us during the pandemic and allowing us to work remotely when necessary. At the bottom of page 4 and the top of page 5 of the handout is a summary of our budget request for fiscal year 22. The Board of Architecture requests an appropriation of $355,434 for fiscal year 22, which is just slightly higher than the Joint Legislative Budget Committee recommendation. And the only changes are in the contractual services category, so they're very minimal, resulting in only a slight increase of expenditures of less than 1%. Those expenses increase slightly due to a projected increase in interagency fees paid to the Department of Finance and Administration for use of the Mississippi Management and Reporting System, a slight increase in payments made to the Department of Information Technology Services, and a small increase in membership dues paid to national regulatory councils, of which the board is a member. We do operate over a 2-year income cycle. Most of our revenue is obtained during the even-numbered fiscal years when we have our renewals. Our renewals are every 2 years. So that's why you'll note the chart at the bottom of page 5. Our revenue is much higher in those even-numbered fiscal years because of our renewal revenue. So over this 2-year cycle, we essentially strive to break even, so that there is a planned deficit in our revenue during those odd-numbered years. But over the 2-year cycle, it's a break even. The board is funded entirely through licensure fees and regulatory fines, so we do not receive funds, of course, from the general fund as a special fund agency. On page 6 is a pie chart showing a source of our revenue, most of which is from renewal and application fees. Over 80% of our revenue comes from out-of-state registrants as well, and you'll notice our licensure statistics on page 6. As of the end of last calendar year, we had 2,107 licensees. 75% of those are from out-of-state, 25% reside in Mississippi, and the majority are architects, 86% architects, 11% landscape architects, and 3% the certified interior designers. And generally, you'll see from the chart at the bottom of page 6, our numbers remain around 2,000 licensees from year to year. It fluctuates a little bit, but generally it's pretty consistent around 2,000. On page 7 are our agency performance measures that are included with our budget each year. Under program efficiencies, you'll note that the percentage of renewals processed online is at 100%. This past renewal cycle was our first cycle where we received no paper manual renewals. Everything was online. So it's the first time we've done that, so I was very proud of that. Our percentage of new applications processed online is at 92%, but as I mentioned, we should get that higher once we get our last 2 paper applications online. And percentage of completed applications free of eligibility issues processed within 3 weeks was at 100%. You know, we're averaging about 2 weeks typically for those reviews. On page 8, you'll note that the board is committed to providing architects, landscape architects, interior designers, students, interns, building officials, and allied professionals with educational opportunities. We do present information to these groups on a regular basis. We also publish a newsletter, and in doing so, our goal is to educate licensees to prevent violations versus resorting to disciplinary actions when possible. We're continuing to work with the Board of Licensure for professional engineers and surveyors through a joint committee to discuss common issues and concerns, and we're continuing to work with them to revise our handbook for building officials. And the board is also very active in national credentialing and exam organizations for the design professions, the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, the Council of Landscape Architectural Registration Boards, and the Council for Interior Design Qualification. And these organizations are made up of licensing boards from throughout the U.S. They develop model laws and regulations. They provide legally defensible national exams for the design professions. They maintain records for licensees and certificate holders to make it easier for them to apply for licenses in multiple states. And they do provide resources to the licensing boards as well, such as disciplinary databases that we utilize to report our actions and learn of actions in other states against our registrants. So due largely to the efforts of these organizations, reciprocity does work very well for the professions regulated by the board. The requirements are mostly very uniform from state to state. And as an example of how well this works, in calendar year 2020, 88% of our licenses issued were to out-of-state applicants through the reciprocity process. So a very smooth process for our professions. The board does have a long history of service in these national organizations, which accounts for a portion of our travel funding each year, although here lately we have had a lot of travel expenses, obviously. It is important to note that when members serve in elected offices in these organizations or are appointed to committees, that travel is not funded by the board nor by dues paid by the board. But we do have several members, current and past members, who have served in national or regional offices, on committees. Some have been past president of these organizations, which is notable, you know, coming from a state with a smaller population like Mississippi, that we've had several that have served in those national positions. And it's important that we have that seat at the table in these organizations, because these organizations do develop exam policies and procedures that impact Mississippi residents. So it's important that we have that voice. So in conclusion, the board is a committed consumer protection agency that protects the public through proactive licensure and regulatory efforts. We'd have a strong enforcement and regulatory program, a thorough application process, and a responsible educational agenda. And as I mentioned, in addition to the good work that the board is accomplishing in Mississippi, the members affect their respective professions nationally through leadership positions in national organizations while remaining fiscally responsible and efficient. So we respectfully request an appropriation of $355,000 $434 for fiscal year '22. And we'll be happy to entertain any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Cothran. Are there any questions? I think it was a, sure, proceed.
I'm just assuming, since y'all do so well with getting your licensing online, y'all haven't had any effects due to COVID or anything?
Okay, that's a good question. About our revenue effects, we have seen a very slight decrease in applications, but nothing alarming at this point. Usually for the design professions, people don't drop their licenses due to economic downturns historically. That just doesn't occur as much as you might see in some occupations and trades. Yeah, our renewal cycle will, for this coming year, I mean, we'll start at the end of the year. So, we'll know better then if we might have an impact from out-of-state licensees dropping their Mississippi license. At this point, we're not expecting a huge impact from the economic situation. But, we'll know more next year than we know at this point. But yeah, so far applications have been remaining pretty steady for us. Yeah.
Were you all deemed essential under the executive orders from the governor?
I'm sorry?
Are essential businesses, were you all characterized as essential businesses?
Yes, we were, because we're related to the construction industry. Yeah. So yeah, we considered ourselves at least to be essential.
Of course, yes.
But with the technology that we have, and with our files being paperless now, I mean, we were able to just continue services working from home during the pandemic. So our services were not interrupted at all.
This was an excellent presentation. Thank you. Any questions? Well, thank you for coming to present to us. You have a great weekend.
Thank you.
We look
Same
forward to
you.
seeing you again.
Appreciate it. Thank you. You too.